Morning.
The metaphor works. I'm literally without baggage. We have to leave our baggage behind, right? But also last night I happened to mention that I got offers from 4 people to give me their shirts. So literally we give each other the shirts off of our back. Okay, that's what conscious capitalism is about. I'm really, really happy to be here, to be back in this beautiful space, on this beautiful stage. Isn't that an amazing stage? I don't know who designed this, but let's give them a hand. Yeah, it's like, wow. So we have about 30 minutes. I'm going to give a brief overview of conscious capitalism for those who might be new to it, although there aren't that many, and then talk about my current passion, or even you might call it obsession, with the idea of healing and how business actually can be an instrument, a force, and a source of healing in the world, which we clearly need in this day and time. Now, let's first spend a few minutes just talking about capitalism. It's already been mentioned, it's an extraordinary system, perhaps one of the greatest ideas humanity has ever had for collectively elevating our quality of life, our flourishing. And it's not something that has always existed, so this idea is relatively new. And if you look at the last 2,000 years of economic history, you can see that for most of that time, per capita incomes were below $500 per person per year, adjusted for inflation on a global basis. So that means 90 to 95% of people living in abject poverty, basically struggling to stay alive. That was the default condition of humanity, and not much changed over time. In fact, we kind of went backwards from the year 0 to the year 1000, and even through the Dark Ages, and then the emergence into the Renaissance, and then science and reason and Newton and Galileo. Significant breakthroughs happened, but they did not impact ordinary human beings. Finally, in the 18th century, when we had the Industrial Revolution in Scotland around 1750, we had a significant step forward, where now our productive capacity went up significantly. So that is probably the greatest technological leap forward that we had ever taken. But it wasn't enough. We also needed an intellectual breakthrough to understand how to better organize human societies. And that came also from Scotland a quarter century later. We should do one of these things in Scotland at some point, right? I mean, Scotland, I thought it was golf and Scotch whiskey is all they gave us, but they gave us the Scottish Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and Adam Smith, who explained for the first time the power of markets. He was asking, why do some places prosper and others remain mired in poverty? And most people would have said it has to do with natural resources or the work ethic, and that actually did not explain prosperity. He found it had to do with freedom. Societies rooted in individual freedom are where people actually end up creating the conditions where everybody flourishes, where we sense and meet each other's needs and do it in a way that's natural and compelling for us. So we're able to live our life through our passions and serve each other. And that freedom leads to prosperity is a tremendous insight if you think about it. You don't have to trade off those two things. They go together. And then those ideas came together and were manifested most fully in the United States, which was the same year, 1776, that The Wealth of Nations was published, was the birth of that country. And that's a unique moment in human history, not just for the United States, but it's the first time a country came into existence based on a set of shared beliefs, revolving around personal freedom, religious freedom, political freedom, economic freedom. And of course, it didn't extend to all members of that society, but over time, living up to those beautiful words in the Declaration of Independence has really inspired all of humanity. And that combination has really enabled humanity to take off. So in the last 200 years, per capita incomes have risen 1,500% globally in real terms, and much more than that in the industrialized world. Per capita incomes, but also life expectancy has gone from roughly 28 to 30, which is what it was for most of human history, to well over 70 now. Literacy has gone from 13% to 87%. And the percentage of people now living in extreme poverty is about 9%. $1.90 a day is the current definition. So we're down from 90 to 9% in about 200 years. And we will eradicate that if we continue to spread freedom around the world. That's really the correlate there. Now, despite all that progress, however, we do know that we're living at a time of deep cynicism and distrust about business. And this is actually not new. It's been going on for decades. The amount of confidence that Americans have, for example, in big business, has been going down since the Gallup started tracking this in the early 70s. It was as low as 16% in the financial crisis that we had. It's about 21% now. But still, that's a very, very low number. Think about 80% of Americans, the home of global capitalism, don't have confidence in big business or in capitalism. In fact, a majority of Americans, especially young people now, think that socialism might be a better idea. And this should worry us all. We know that doesn't work. Capitalism works. It has its flaws, and that's what we're here to talk about. It has its potential to do even more. Capitalism promises and does deliver dynamism. Socialism promises but does not deliver decency, as Jonathan Haidt has put it. Right? And what we need is not one or the other. We need dynamism with decency. We can't survive without dynamism and innovation and creativity, but we want decency. We don't want people to be left behind. We don't want the kinds of impacts that we have been seeing. So what do we do about this is the question. Why do we have all this cynicism and distrust? A system rooted in freedom and human dignity, somehow the way that we have actualized it, operationalized it, talked about it, taught about it, has led to this level of cynicism and distrust. And what that means is those people who are cynical and distrustful cannot be creative. They can't be engaged, right? You can't really innovate if you're coming from a place of cynicism. And we need all the innovation that people are capable of. Plus, of course, we want people to be happier and more fulfilled in their lives, and that's not happening. So where did this come from? And I would argue that the single biggest, if you had to pinpoint one factor, it is this idea that evolved over time that business exists only for this one reason, profit maximization. And I think this is, not only is it a selfish way of looking at things, it's an instrumental, it treats people as means to an end. Right? The well-being of people should be the end, but this makes people a means to another end, which is just profit. And it's a very narrow understanding. Profit is one kind of outcome for one kind of stakeholder that results from business. But there are many, many, many other things that happen for all the other stakeholders of the business. We need to think about all of those as well. And the irony of this is that it actually doesn't work. The more you obsess about profit maximization, the more you end up doing things that ultimately harm your ability to generate profits and shareholder value. And you can see this at a macro level over the last 40 plus years, or 50 years really, that the performance at a cumulative or the aggregate economy level in the US has been going down in terms of return on assets. In the early 70s is when shareholder value kind of took center stage as the dominant paradigm. And since then it has steadily actually gone down. So corporate performance has actually declined significantly in that time. So this approach has failed even on its own narrow terms, which is making money. We're actually making less. We are generating poorer returns on the investments that we're making. And at the same time, the benefits of this system are being incredibly concentrated. You can see that real incomes for workers have basically been flat for a 35-year period, whereas executive pay has skyrocketed. By the way, this doesn't include benefits like health care and pensions and all the things that used to exist for a larger number of people. That all of that is gone, and wages are flat. So we have this tremendous gap that is growing, right? And this is a dangerous thing. This is what revolutions spring from, right? This is where all the turmoil that we're experiencing right now with the populist uprisings and so forth. Behind that, there's some real distress that we have used capitalism not in the way that it can operate, which is to create widespread flourishing, but actually we've created too many winners and losers in this, and too many losers really, and a few people winning. So again, if you think about what is the kind of central understanding of capitalism and business, there are a couple of ways to look at it. So Calvin Coolidge, just before the Great Depression in the US, said, the business of America is business. And this was in a speech, right? Now, if you think about it, it's actually quite true. America is a country that was founded on the idea of entrepreneurialism in any sphere. Right? So everybody there, you don't grow up aspiring to get a government job. It pretty much sort of create your own destiny and your own future. But it does beg the question, what is the business of business? Because this could be a wonderful thing depending on how we think about business. And this is where, for a long time now, we've had the perspective where Alfred Sloan and Milton Friedman and others have said, it's very simple, business of business is business. Right? We do our job, which is make money, and universities do their job, educate people, and government does its job, and so everybody stay in your lane and do your job. Well, again, it's a narrow view because we have so many consequences. There's another perspective which a conscious leader named Herb Kelleher, who created the most successful airline in the history of the world, Southwest, 50 years of consecutive growth, 0 layoffs in that time period, never laid off anybody even after 9/11. By the way, had their first casualty about a month ago. Imagine an airline for 50 years, nobody died. Okay, the first time. Stock market symbol is love, L-U-V. And he said the business of business is people, yesterday, today, and forever. And that's what we have lost sight of. This is all about human flourishing. If that's not what we're trying to do in our lives, then what are we trying to do? What else is there? It's about flourishing of life, all life, especially human life. And this is where I think we've lost the thread in business. We've made profit the highest goal and people somewhere below that serving that other goal. Flourishing of people needs to be the highest goal, and profit is one of the many things that serves that. Profits are essential, but they are not the purpose. So we need to arrive at a deeper and multidimensional understanding of human beings. We've built this system on a one-dimensional understanding, which is it's all about self-interest. Adam Smith's theory of the Wealth of Nations is about self-interest, right? But he wrote another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiment 17 years prior, which is about the human need to care. So we left caring out. I call it the father energy and the mother energy. We left the mother energy out of capitalism. Human need to care. It's in all of us. We were forced to leave it at home or check it at the door. There's no place for that in business. Business is a kind of war. All our language, our metaphors, it all comes from the military. Hierarchy, command and control, strategy, tactics, operations, front lines, headquarters, staff, line, these are all military terms. So we've kind of made business into battle. Business is not war. So we need to acknowledge the human need to care, an even more powerful drive than self-interest, if you really had to choose at some point. Increasingly, more and more of us are also now driven by purpose. In most of human history, purpose was to survive. But now, thankfully, many of us can elevate to higher levels in terms of our needs and think about why was I born? What is the purpose of my life? And the last is joy, right? We want bliss, we want ananda, as we say in India, right? And that's completely possible when we are operating in our essence, doing something that matters in the company of people we truly care about. So I think we need to think about all of these elements in business and not just make it this sort of one-dimensional thing about self-interest, everybody pursuing their self-interest and everybody becoming a taker in a way from the system. So this is where the pillars of conscious capitalism try to address these needs and these cravings that human beings have, starting with a higher purpose. All human beings should have that, so should every business. And of course, we need to think about all of the stakeholders and not only serve and create value for each, don't use and exploit them, serve them and create value for each of them, but also learn how to integrate them together so that what's good for the customers is good for employees, good for the community, good for investors, etc. And a lot of these companies, Mercadona being one of them here in Spain, completely embodies that. Low prices for customers, some of the lowest, highest quality, and great working conditions for employees, right? Wonderful citizen in the community, etc. How do we create that win-win-win-win-win all around? And then, of course, leaders who care about people, who care about the purpose, and not just about power and ego, right? And then cultures that are rooted in caring and trust and fun, and not fear and stress, which is what we find in most companies. So for each of these, we are addressing why, who, what, and how, and for each we have an acronym that kind of captures the essence of that. So purpose, I'm going to talk about a little more, but the idea of healing, that every great purpose needs to be a healing purpose because there is a lot of suffering and pain in the world. And if through our business, if we can alleviate suffering and bring more joy, that would be the most noble thing that we can do. But it also stands for the qualities of a great purpose. It's heroic, evolving, aligning, loving, inspiring, natural, and galvanizing. For the stakeholders, I use the acronym SPICE, or SPICE now actually. When you're from India, everything has to have SPICE, right? But it stands for society, partners, investors, customers, employees, and the environment. We need to think about all of them at the same time. For leaders, it's selfless. You cannot be a selfish human being and claim to be a leader. Because that means you're going to use other people to achieve your personal objectives. And that is the definition of a tyrant. That is not a leader. A true leader is there to take people to a better place, to create a vision of what is possible, which they didn't even imagine was possible, and then how do we collectively get there? So you have to transcend the self. So it's selfless, but it also stands for the qualities of strength and enthusiasm and long-term orientation, flexibility, love, again, and emotional systems and spiritual intelligence. You can see a combination of masculine and feminine in there. We need strength and we need a capacity for love and care. So Martin Luther King said we must be tough-minded and tender-hearted. It's not one or the other. That's the great missing piece, that has been lacking in the world, right? That the human need and capacity for caring. That has to be embodied in the leader. And then cultures, where the acronym is tactile. You can feel it. You walk into one of these businesses, you know it, right? It stands for trust, authenticity, etc. So the research that we've done and then others have also done has shown that companies that actually operate in this way are more successful in the long term, right? And this was a bit of a surprise when we first uncovered. They said they're paying their people better, investing in their suppliers, their customers, and their communities, and the environment, paying taxes even at a higher rate. Maybe there's less money for investors. Maybe that's okay if you look at total value creation, but actually they outperformed. The original set of 28 companies in that book, Firms of Endearment, was 9-1 over a 10-year period. And then we've extended that and added more data and more extended time periods and so forth. But the outperformance is still dramatic. So these companies are very, very successful as well. They are profitable. Even while they are not trying to maximize profits, they are actually more profitable. It's like people who are not obsessed with happiness but are doing the things that lead to happiness are happier, right? Because they're doing work that matters. They're operating from love and care. And same thing for these companies. They're very profitable. Profit is a social good. It is socially irresponsible not to be profitable. Without profit, society doesn't function. Government don't create wealth. They can only tax and then spend the wealth created by business. And without that, we don't have infrastructure and public education and all the other things that we want. So profits are essential, but it matters how you make the money. Because you can make it by squeezing everybody, right? Your employees and your communities and your environment and suppliers and so forth. Or you can actually make it by simultaneously having positive impacts in multiple dimensions. Because businesses not only create financial, but they also create intellectual, social, emotional, spiritual, cultural, physical, and ecological well-being, or they can destroy each of those things too, depending on how they operate with what consciousness and what mindset. And conscious business tries to have a positive impact in all these areas for all their stakeholders as long as they exist. And a conventional business will say, well, we're about maximizing profits, shareholder value, right? We don't question that. And everything else that happens is a side effect. When the reality is there's no such thing on this planet called a side effect. We do things and there are effects. And we need to do business with a spectrum of positive effects because we collectively cannot afford anymore those so-called side effects. They are literally killing us and they're killing our planet. We need to have a radical departure from the way that we have been operating. Business with a spectrum of positive effects. Literally, we are dying because of the way we work. Jeffrey Pfeffer's brand new book just came out a couple of months ago. 120,000 incremental deaths a year in the US alone because of the way in which we lead and run companies. Okay, and that's just one kind of impact on one stakeholder. Many, many other consequences of the toxic way in which we have created the world of work. Yes? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay, is that any different, any better? Not sure. Is that okay? Can you hear me? I'll also speak a little louder. So the fact is we're living in an interesting time. Physical violence is down. Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, shows violence is down 95, 99%. Murders, terrorism, wars, etc. All these things are down dramatically. But psychic suffering is up a lot. Depression, anxiety, and suicides are up. Okay? And there's a distress signals that we're getting that something is not working in the way that we are living and working in our lives. And I would argue that business is a major cause of this. Is where we spend the bulk of our time. So business is a major cause of the suffering, and I'll try to make that case very quickly here. And it also needs to be and has to be the primary cure. We cannot get people stressed out and burned out and then send them to spas and other places to heal up and then bring them back and then we churn them again. Business itself has to be a place of healing. We don't need to go somewhere to heal from business. We should heal within business. And it's completely possible. If you think about business as service, as taking care of each other, it is a healing activity, actually, meeting each other's needs. The reality is 88% of Americans feel they work for a company that doesn't even think about them as human beings. They're a function, they're an object, interchangeable, right? You can lay them off, do whatever you need to do. Heart attacks are 20% higher on Monday morning. This is a different kind of Monday morning today. Right? But in general, this is 4 a.m. Monday morning is the peak of heart attacks. Think about what that means. What an indictment that is of what we're doing in the office. And think about the amount of stress that people, financial stress. 60% of American households are technically insolvent today. Their liabilities exceed their assets, and they're going further into debt every year. This is at a time when they're saying this is a booming economy and the stock market and full employment. Yeah, but look under the hood. 60% of American households. And 50% of Americans, if they needed $2,000 within 30 days, would not be able to come up with it. In fact, they have less than $400 in the bank on average. 50% of Americans. Think how close you are to the edge of disaster when you're living with that day and night, the financial stress, the uncertainty. And all of this has gotten worse in recent years. And when you have that, it of course shows up as all kinds of physical manifestations, right? From blood pressure to migraines to depression to anxiety and all of those kinds of things. So people are really struggling out there. Our system is not creating the kind of conditions that it should, and is leading to all kinds of stress. And the irony is that even our healing professions, doctors, nurses, and veterinarians suffer from higher rates of depression and drug addiction and even suicide. Doctor suicide is double the national rate in the US. We have taken noble work and made it a cause of suffering because of the way in which we choose to run those things as businesses. So there's something, the way we work isn't working. So I would argue that healing needs to be the meta purpose of our time. There's a tremendous need for healing in every dimension. Right? Certainly we need to heal ourselves, our families and our communities, and our work has a lot to do with our capacity for doing that. We do need to heal our companies and our countries. So many countries are going through tremendous division and strife. Certainly we need to heal our planet and all the life that's perishing right before our eyes and all the ecosystems that are dying. And I just came from India and our ancestral village where we had this thriving, beautiful farm. I went there the last time and there are no parrots and there are no crows and there are no sparrows and there are no vultures left. They're all gone. It's like a dead place. I said, what happened? It's all the heavy use of chemicals and fertilizer. All the stuff is killing life. What are we doing? And we also need to heal the past in order to heal in the future. We need to have some version of that truth and reconciliation process in South Africa. So a lot of need for healing, and if we don't consciously choose to be part of the healing, in whatever capacity we operate as businesses or even as individuals, if we're not consciously choosing to be part of healing, we are probably inadvertently part of the hurting. We are adding to people's burdens. People have enough burdens. We don't need to add to that, right? And we don't need to kill people to make money, it turns out. The fact is, we have sophisticated accounting systems for everything. We track every cost down to the fraction of a penny, but we do not put a price tag on suffering. The human cost of doing business is extraordinarily, unconscionably, criminally high. Okay? What we are extracting from people in order to pursue profits. And as the Dalai Lama said, our prime purpose is to help others, and if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. And I would argue that we are hurting a lot of people in business. So how do we change that? So doing business right can actually alleviate all of this. Alleviate suffering and elevate joy. Not only do heart attacks not have to go up on Monday morning, heart attacks can go down on Monday morning if you have the right kind of workplace. If you work at Patagonia, I can guarantee that heart attacks are lower, okay, on Monday morning. Okay. So this is not about healing business. It's not about saying all of us need to get into the spa and yoga business. This is about business as healing. If you think about business as service, as taking care of each other, well, that's a healing activity. And that's what it should be. So how can we do that? How can business do that? Very quickly in 5 minutes, just some thoughts about that. As James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. We need to face up to this reality. A lot of people get uncomfortable. Oh, I'm running a business, I'm creating jobs, I'm doing all of this stuff. Yeah. Have you ever actually looked at and listened to your people and understood the reality of their life and what they're going through? If you don't face that, you're never going to see the suffering. You'll see it when you believe it. And we saw this in an interview we did with a CEO of a call center company. We call it the parable of the Pothole. A company that runs a call center where you have hourly employees and salaried employees, and the employee turnover is 15% with the salaried, and it's 118% with the hourly. And the industry average is 150, so he thought he was doing well, But But the fact is, their lives are so different. And as he talked about, imagine if our CFO is driving to work and hits a pothole, her Mercedes, and she calls the AAA and gets the car towed away, and then it's repaired and delivered back to her office, washed and cleaned. And when she gets to the office an hour later, everybody is very conciliatory towards her, and I say, "Are you okay? That must have been pretty traumatic to blow out a tire like that." One of our hourly people is driving to work, and she hits the same thing in her $800 car. And now she doesn't have insurance and doesn't have AAA, and she doesn't know how she's going to get to work and how she's going to pay for this thing, which could be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And she only has $200 in the bank. And finally gets to work somehow 3 hours late, and then she's reprimanded by the supervisor and told that 3 strikes and you're out, and this is a black mark against you. And then she's told, okay, now go and be nice to our customers on the phone. It's a non-event for the CFO. It's a traumatic event in her life. Nobody gives a damn. And we actually add to her burdens. We make it worse for her, right? We have all these potholes. What are we doing? They found out, they created a program to help people. The company's Apple Tree Answers. And they say, if you have this kind of problem, apply, and we want to help people. And nobody applied for 2 weeks. And finally, because people are proud, right? People are stoic. People are heroic. They carry around these extraordinary burdens. And finally, they heard from a woman who's a full-time employee. She said, I'm so sorry, but my ex-husband stopped paying child support, and I got evicted from our apartment last week, and I've been living in the car with my 2 kids for a week. And I'm sorry, I just can't do this to them anymore, And the CEO saw this, and the only thing he felt was a deep sense of shame. He said, what kind of business am I running here? Somebody who works for me full-time is homeless, and her kids are living in a car, and she can't even tell me? What am I doing? I think we need to awaken some healthy shame in our organizations to actually see the reality of the consequences of the way in which we are operating on people. So there are many, many things we can do to heal. We can change and break the industry norms. Consulting, for example, JBN Consulting broke the norm that you have to be away Monday to Thursday every week, and therefore you never get to see your kids. And they said, that's too high a price to pay. So in Atlanta, they said all clients will be local, and children are our stakeholders. Your children are the stakeholders in this business. Their well-being inherently matters. Confronting social sadness. There are many, many things in every society that are just begging to be addressed. America, it's many things, but one of them is the prison population, or the percentage of Americans, the number of Americans that have a criminal record is 70 million. 70 million Americans have some kind of thing in their past where they had some problem, and there's a box you have to check on every employment application. Have you ever been convicted of something, right? 70 million Americans have to check that box. The same number that have a college degree. And for most of them, even though they've served their time, made their mistake, whatever they had to do, most doors are closed. And they end up going back doing the things that got them in trouble. So Greyston Bakery started with this idea that we're going to give people a first chance, not a second chance. Many people don't even get a first chance. Born in the ghetto, terrible school, surrounded by drugs and violence. You have nothing in your life, right? So he said they practice open hiring. You need a job, you put your name on that list. They just go down the list. No interviews, no background checks. They say we don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people, right? They're trying to create a future for those people. I was just in Jaipur yesterday. I can't believe, when did I get here? I don't know. Yeah. And this beautiful company called Jaipur Rugs, which has taken these weavers with the traditional beautiful art form that has existed for millennia, who were tremendously exploited by the contractors and others and paid horribly low wages and abused on top of that, and had husbands who were alcoholics and abused them as well. And meanwhile, they're trying to look after children. It's a hellish existence. And they came along and they've created this company called Jaipur Rugs, and they're connecting these weavers with the buyers all over the world, treating them far, far better, and paying them well, and giving them dignity and respect. And as they say, these are the innocents. These are the innocents of the world, and we're protecting them from the cunning people who were taking advantage of them. So that's 40,000 of these women. I met one who has 5 children, and they're all going to go to college now. 2 are already in college. And she's an illiterate woman making carpets because she's attached to Jaipur Rugs now. Right? Her children have a whole different, for multi-generations to come now, have a whole different future. We can heal communities through business. There's a retailer in San Antonio, Texas called HEB. And when the Hurricane Harvey hit, they show up before the FEMA and before Red Cross. They have 24-hour, 7 days a week emergency operations that are always in place. Okay, tremendous asset to that community. And as their CEO, the chairman of that company, Charles, by the way, started by his grandmother. Okay, this company has that grandmother energy in it. Okay, he says, please pay our people as much as possible. That's what he tells the CEO and the leaders of that company. Pay our people as much as possible, not as little as possible. Healing the environment, I mean, this is obviously a huge thing. 9 million deaths are directly attributable to pollution. And most of that is the result of the way in which we do business. I have an image of my mother's hometown in India, where there's a beautiful river called the Chambal. And I have a satellite image from Google Earth. It shows a beautiful blue, wide river and greenery all around it. And then you hit Nagda, where is this big polyester rayon, etc., plant that the Birlas have put up. And then you look at downstream, it's black, and everything around it is gray. Okay, there's no life downstream. This business got in the middle, right? What are we doing? How is that okay? How is that even acceptable or legal? Now, the difference ultimately is leadership, right? If you create a healing organization or hurting, it's going to be about the leader. The macrocosm, what we manifest in the world, is a reflection of the microcosm, what's inside us as leaders, right? So we have to consciously choose to be a healing leader. And as John Kenneth Galbraith said, all great leaders have this one characteristic in common, the willingness to confront unequivocally the major anxieties of people in their time. And unfortunately, most leaders today are not doing that. They are exploiting those anxieties, but they're not addressing them. And in the world of business, it's a very dangerous trend. So we have companies like 3G Capital out of Brazil, which nearly acquired Unilever, by the way, last year, if you remember, in a hostile takeover. Everything that Unilever stands for and that Paul Pullman is trying to do would have been gone, right? Forget about environment, sustainability, all the rest of it, right? Cut back on R&D, lay off 20% of your people, do all of that. This is one way in which businesses operate and think about growth. This is about growing an empire. So many businesses operate from that place. Why do you grow an empire? It's rooted in ego. It's about power and money. That's your driving force behind growing your business. You're growing an empire, and you don't grow empires by serving people. You go by conquering people and causing suffering. And that's what we have in the world. And there's another way embodied by Bob Chapman. And I know we have a workshop this afternoon from the Barry Wehmiller Leadership Institute, right? The power of caring for your people like family. 115 companies they will have acquired by the end of this year, struggling and dying businesses. Giving them a future, giving those people a future, those towns would have been erased from the map if Bob hadn't bought them. And why does he keep, at the age of 73, keep buying a dozen companies a year? He said, on my deathbed, I will not be proud of the money we made or the machines we built. I will be proud of the lives we touched. And I don't know how much time I have left, how many lives I can touch. I said, Bob, you're spreading a ministry. You're not growing a business. You are healing. You're bringing joy and well-being and flourishing to people. That's the only motivation here. Right? So again, if we do business with that mindset of service and care, it's a whole different energy. In India, we have many gurus, okay? So this is one of the things. He said, you can expand through embrace or conquest, but you cannot include people by conquering them. You need to include people. They're part of the journey, right? And you do that by embrace. Mercadona, again, a lot of wonderful things. We can, as an example of a company that I think is a healing organization. But since we're out of time, I will just go to our conclusion here. So ultimately, it's pretty simple, right? We take care of the people, and the people will take care of the business. And we're not doing this very well. We're using the people, we're exploiting the people, etc. So thank you again very much. I'm delighted to be here with you today and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.